for a Historic Pauper deck tech of my latest build of Mardu Skyfisher. There's a ton of options. Obviously, playing 3 colors, you got access to a ton of different cards. And so this deck list is constantly evolving, so this is by no means final, but this is where I'm at as far as what I think is optimal for the tournament today. So basically, the biggest change recently was going to play 12 of these tap gain life lands instead of the other options in Historic. I think that that 1 life really adds up with the amount of card draw. You're making a land drop every turn, so you're gaining on average 1 life every other turn, and it seems to work out pretty well in this deck that is going to go long. And the life is really important for this deck against the decks that it's weak against. That's also why Okiba Reckon Raid is probably one of the best cards in the deck. Is just the 2 incidental life with a very efficient threat attached to it is very, very nice. Latest or just kind of the deck in case you haven't seen it before. Basically, it's around abusing the synergy between Kor Skyfisher and Experimental Synthesizer, and basically other cards that work really well with these bounce creatures. And the cards that work well, Inspector works okay. It's not really a good bounce target, but it's just good as pressure and because it cantrips itself. Hopeless Nightmare is okay in certain matchups. I originally was playing full 4 of these when it first came out, and now I have cut down to just 1 because it's only okay in certain matchups. And so, and then the matchups where I really want it, I can just hit 1 of them and then kind of rebounce it and rebuy it back if it's going to end up being good. But otherwise, I don't really want to hit it late in the game. I'd much rather hit my draw spells. Mogis' Favor has been kind of just a solid performer. Basically able to hit 1 toughness creatures, and then against the control decks, put it on your own creatures, which all have above 2 toughness. So they can wear the Mogis' Favor like an equipment, basically. As I said, Okiba Reckon Raid, one of the best cards in the deck because of the crucial life that it gains to just drag out the games. And then it dealing 2 damage and having Menace actually does close out the game pretty quickly against opponents that are also trying to grind. And then Omen of the Dead is this really obnoxious loop with these. Obviously, if any of these are in the graveyard, you can bring them all back 1 by 1 with Omen of the Dead. And then anytime that they die in combat, you can always bring them back. So the only way that the loop is interrupted is exile removal or exiling the Omen target in response to the Omen. Experimental Synthesizer, like I said, the core of the deck. The fact that basically either of these is 2 mana, you draw the Synthesizer, but then you also you impulse with the Synthesizer, and then you also pick up the Synthesizer to replay it again later. And so basically, this is basically a 2 mana, draw 2 cards eventually. But the first, you can split it up between 2 and then 1 extra mana. Torture Tower, just the solid removal. I think it's the best removal spell right now in Historic Pauper. There's plenty of stuff to sack. I mean, Ichor Wellspring, but Synthesizer also is a reasonable sack target, bargain target to turn this on. It also gets turned on by your Hopeless Nightmare. And then if you had to, your Tithing Blades, your Treasure Token, there's plenty of other things to do. I did consider playing the Artifact lands to also enable the sack on, but I figured I already have too many tap lands, and the life is more important than occasionally turning these on. I turn them on so easily anyways that it's not that necessary to have a land that also can enable these. Voltage Surge, there's a lot of decks there's some crucial 4 toughness creatures in the format that really give this deck fits. So rather than attacking in and then teaming up, sacking a creature to their 4 toughness creature and then using Torch, you now have the option to just blow the creature out before blocks and still keep getting in for damage. Because even though this is all 1 and 2 drops, this is a control deck at heart, and so the way that it's going to win is by pinging in for 1 damage a turn while just accruing endless amounts of card advantage. And so sacrificing one of your creatures to deal with one of theirs isn't completely ideal. I mean, if you have to do it, you have to do it. But all right. So as discussed before, the balanced creatures are really the core of the deck with the synthesizer. I play one Deadly Dispute because one of the ways to break up the Omen of the Dead combo is to exile these creatures, and then so you can Deadly Dispute them to avoid them going to the exile and keep them in the graveyard for bringing them back with Omen of the Dead. So it's kind of nice. Deadly Dispute also fixes your mana a little bit, and you can kind of get 1 mana back from it. So it's like a 1 mana draw 2 sometimes. So it works out pretty well. Tithing Blade, just overall solid, obviously works really well with the bounce. I'm only playing 3 because there's just a lot of situations where there's incidental creatures, and it's you really, since this is a control deck, you really have some creatures that you want to get off the board, and the other ones you can just leave, and then basically your Thraben Inspectors hold down the ground and your Skyfishers hold down the air. So as long as you remove key creatures, so that's why Edicts aren't ideal, but it's a very cheap and bounceable target, so it gets 3 slots. I love these cards, but they've gone down and down as far as the count, because I'm just trying to fit in all of these other cards that end up being better than these cards, but they're still very solid. Basically draw 2 with no. The downside is the opponent can see the cards, and sometimes there's some awkward draws where you won't be able to deploy all of the cards by the next turn. But most of the time you're able to. And then Ichor Wellspring just basically is a 2 mana draw 2 in colorless, and it enables turning on your other cards, so it's also a very solid player in the deck. And then I already discussed the land base. And then the sideboard, obviously being 3 colors, you get a lot of good options. So these are probably the best options in Mardu colors. So you get some 2 new 1 mana removal spells in addition to the ones that you're playing. So another Voltage Surge against the decks that have those 4 toughness creatures, and then Strangle and Fire Impulse against the Thermal Alchemist and Flame Breather decks. Or any other decks that play 3 toughness creatures or lower. Even elves, you just want to have infinite untapped mountains and just blow their elves up before they can ramp to bigger stuff that can get out of range of your burn. The 4 relics for Treasure Cruise decks, you just got to play it, unfortunately. Hopeless Nightmare to augment against control decks, against fog decks, against any decks where card advantage becomes a little bit matter, and you can kind of become a beatdown by bouncing Hopeless Nightmare several times and dealing 2 damage every time. It allows you to deploy your Skyfishers earlier, so it's kind of nice for those kind of matchups. It's also good against Storm as well. Navigator's Compass against the aggro decks. Not really aggro, against burn. Against aggro, you actually want to just draw more cards rather than gain 3 life, because aggro decks can really rack up the damage a lot more than 3 damage a turn. But against burn, you want this. A-Dawnbringer Cleric is really good against opposing Okibas, plus the Modern Age are really good targets for it. And then occasionally the life gain is important against the aggro decks, and it's nice in the sense that it gains life, but it adds to the board as well, and it's another bounceable target. Echoing Decay again for Storm, and occasionally some other matches it's okay against. Tithing Blade for the big green decks basically, and for the Tolarian Terror decks, you just want the full 4 Tithing Blades, and so just in case they counter one of them, you can keep playing and bouncing. You only have basically to get 1 resolved. And then Casting the Fires, this is, against Weenie decks, it's against Artifact decks, and it's also really good against Storm decks or Affinity decks that are trying to abuse the bridge lands. So hitting the bridge lands, especially if they're using the Cleansing Wildfire ramp plan, this being instant speed in response to their target, you can exile it and fizzle their Cleansing Wildfire and get rid of their land, so it's a huge blowout. So it's a great card. Unfortunately, I only can fit 2, given I'm just predicting what I'm going to face and what this deck is weak against. So, but very flexible cards that are available in these colors, and then they all kind of complement the deck's main strategy. So let's see how I do today. Hopefully you guys enjoy, and comment below any kind of deck list changes that you would recommend, or any cards that you think I should try. I think I've tried most of the cards in the colors, and so what you see here is probably a pretty my take on what I think is going to be the best way to build it, but we'll see what you think. Bye bye.